All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful and honestly, a pretty counterintuitive idea about human connection. We're going to unpack a perspective that might just flip what you think you know about love and what really gets in its way.
So here's the big idea right out of the gate, from the speaker Christopher West. It challenges something most of us just assume is true. We're taught that love and hate are opposites, right? Well, this argument says, nope. The true opposite of love is something way more common and maybe more subtle. It's using another person.
And to really get what this means, the speaker shares this pretty raw story from his own life. Picture this. He's 14. He makes out with a girl, and he's on top of the world. But then he finds out she wasn't into him at all. She just wanted a story to tell her friends. Ouch. That feeling of being used, he says, it just shattered him. And it made him harden his own heart, kind of deciding, well, if I'm going to be used, I'll just start using people too. It's a tough story, but man, it makes this whole concept hit home.
So why do we do this? Why do we use each other? Well, according to this perspective, it all boils down to what he calls a crisis of vision. It's this idea that our culture has trained us to look at people, but we've forgotten how to truly see them.
And there's a huge difference between looking and seeing. Looking is totally skin deep. It's all about the external stuff. He even calls it a culture of plastic surgery. But seeing, that's something else entirely. That's about perceiving the inner mystery and the beauty of a person. It's the difference between just noticing what someone looks like and actually recognizing who they are.
And this crisis of vision has a huge, huge consequence. Because when we only look at people, we end up treating them like things. Think about it. A thing is dispensable. It's replaceable. But a person is indispensable. They're totally unrepeatable. You can use a thing, but a person, in this way of thinking, must be honored.
And he even digs into the word person itself to drive this home. It comes from the Greek word prosopon. And what does that mean? It means an encounter, face-to-face or eye-to-eye. How cool is that? It's baked right into the language. To be a person means you're a someone who's meant to be seen, not a something that's just meant to be looked at.
Okay, so all of this leads to a really powerful and kind of uncomfortable question. A moral choice, really. He puts it this way. Am I willing to sacrifice my own pleasure for the value of another person? Or do I prefer to sacrifice other people for the value of my pleasure? Wow. He argues that making that first choice, that's the real starting point of love.
Okay, so if the problem is using and the solution is honoring, you might be thinking, great, but how do I actually do that? It sounds hard. And you'd be right. The speaker says we can't do it on our own. There's actually a prerequisite for real love, and it all comes down to one simple, powerful principle.
And that principle is this. You cannot give what you do not have. I mean, think about that. It's so simple, but it's the absolute core of this whole idea. You can't just pour out love for someone else if your own cup is empty. To really, truly love, you have to be filled up with love first. He uses this theological analogy to explain it, breaking it down into 3 steps. Step 1 is being receptive. He uses the image of an open chalice, ready to receive love from the Father. Step 2 is actually getting filled up, and then, and only then, comes step 3. Because that chalice is now full, it can be poured out for others. You got to receive it before you can give it. And this leads to a fantastic metaphor. He says that to really live this way, we need to be drunk on God's wine, just totally filled with this divine love. Because without it, morality is just a boring list of do this, don't do that. But when you're filled with this love, it's like hearing music that you can't help but dance to. You're not following rules because you have to, you're moving with the rhythm because you feel it.
So as you can probably guess, this whole idea of honoring versus using has massive implications when it comes to sexuality. And to explain how our sexual desires can get distorted, but also how they can be redeemed, he brings in another really powerful metaphor, a beautiful work of art.
He asks us to picture a masterpiece painting. This painting is sexuality as it was meant to be. It shows a man and a woman, naked, but with absolutely no shame. Their union is meant to be a physical sign, a living image of God's own life-giving love.
But then something happens. He says that beautiful painting gets crumpled up, twisted, distorted. And in this messed up state, the script gets flipped. Sex is no longer about life. Instead, life becomes all about sex. It shifts from this sacred giving act to something selfish, which of course leads right back to where we started, pain and using each other.
And this is the really important part. The solution isn't to look at that crumpled up painting, get mad, and just throw it in the trash. He says that's a mistake a lot of people make, on all sides of the conversation. No, the real path forward is to gently take that crumpled art and allow it to be carefully uncrumpled, restored back to its original, breathtaking beauty.
So as we start to wrap this up, the camera kind of pulls back. In this view, things like human love, marriage, even sexuality, they weren't the end goal. They're incredibly important, for sure, but they're more like signposts. They're meant to point us toward a much bigger, divine reality.
He points to a quote from St. Paul to back this up. Paul's talking about the union of a husband and wife, and then he says, "This is a great mystery," and it refers to Christ and the church. Whoa. The idea is that a human marriage is actually supposed to be a living, breathing symbol of this cosmic, divine love story. And he closes this connection with one last story that just, wow. He talks about his father-in-law. The day after he consummated his marriage, he went to Mass, and when he heard the words from the Eucharist, "This is my body given for you," he just started weeping. He told his wife later, "For the first time in my life, I actually understand what those words mean." The physical act of giving himself to his wife in marriage suddenly made this profound spiritual truth click into place for him. And so, this whole perspective leaves us with this final, really provocative question, one that totally flips the script on how we usually talk about this stuff. We always hear that our culture is obsessed with sex, that we value it too much. But what if that's not the problem at all? What if, by making it so casual, so focused on just pleasure, we don't value it nearly enough? That's a challenging thought to chew on. Thanks for digging into this with me.